Long ago, before the galaxy became full of great empires, before fleets and armies ruled the stars, there was a whisper. It was not a law written in stone, not a command forced by warlords, but a simple warning passed from one species to another. Never disturb the humans. That single rule moved through generations, carried like a shadow. Some believed it was an old superstition, the kind of story that parents told children to keep them from exploring dangerous systems. Others believed it was a secret agreement made long ago, something so terrible in the past that no one wanted to repeat it. No one explained why. The archives were silent, the records lost, and the few who claimed to know refused to speak. A strange fear always followed the mention of humans. It was not the kind of fear that came from facing a powerful fleet or a terrible weapon. It was deeper, quieter, and older. It was the kind of fear that made leaders pause before answering questions. The kind of fear that silenced entire council chambers. And yet, as centuries passed, curiosity grew. The galaxy had expanded, spreading into thousands of systems, discovering new species, trading in wonders and technology. Old rules began to feel like chains, and among the younger generations of scholars, whispers turned into questions. How dangerous could one fragile species be? Inside the Grand Council of Eridan, a room filled with the most advanced minds of the age, young scholars gathered. They were not warriors, nor commanders. They were thinkers, dreamers, the kind of explorers who believed every mystery should be solved. They laughed quietly when the ancient rule was mentioned. Their eyes glowed with amusement and arrogance. Fragile creatures, so small, so limited, so short-lived, how could they ever be a danger to the galaxy? One of the younger aliens, a tall scholar with crystal blue skin, leaned back in his seat and asked, "Tell me, are we truly to believe that a species so primitive once scared the entire galaxy into silence? Are we children, afraid of stories in the dark?" The council chamber filled with laughter. Even the elder scholars did not stop them. Fear, after all, grows weaker when time is long and memory is short. They told themselves it was foolish to tremble at shadows. They told themselves the galaxy was strong now, united under great civilizations. What could one forgotten species do against such power? It was then that a proposal was made. A simple, reckless idea. Send a research ship. Go to the system once called Sol, where Earth, the human homeworld, had been abandoned and hidden from maps. Observe it. Study it. Prove once and for all that the rule was nothing more than myth. The vote was quick. A mix of excitement and arrogance filled the chamber. The young scholars believed they would return as heroes, their names remembered as the ones who shattered an old superstition. And so, the order was given. A research vessel, small and advanced, left the safety of the council worlds and slipped into the void, heading toward the forgotten system. The ship entered the dark reaches of space where maps grew old and inaccurate. Long-abandoned relay stations floated silent, their signals broken, their designs ancient. The crew felt a thrill of discovery, for these were places untouched for generations. They spoke of glory, of knowledge, of being the first in centuries to look upon Earth. When the blue planet came into view, there was silence in the control room. For a moment, no one spoke. The world looked strange, unsettling. It was not dead, but it was not alive in the way other worlds were. Clouds moved across the surface, oceans gleamed under starlight, but the sensors gave strange readings. Life signatures were faint, broken, and hard to measure. "Perhaps it is empty," one scholar whispered. "Perhaps they are gone," another said, almost with relief. But then, deep in the data, something stirred. The sensors picked up faint energy beneath the surface. Structures buried in ice and rock. Signals, slow and steady, like heartbeats. The crew frowned at their screens. They had expected ruins, but not this. One of the youngest scholars leaned closer to the display. His voice was full of wonder, but also unease. "Something sleeps here." The air in the control room grew heavy. The laughter and arrogance of the council chamber felt far away now. Each scholar looked at the planet with quiet unease, but pride held them in place. They would not admit fear. "We are here to study," their leader reminded them. "We are here to learn. Whatever lies on that world, we will uncover the truth." They prepared landing craft, ignoring the strange warnings in the data. The ship moved into orbit, its engines humming softly as it descended through thick clouds. From above, the planet looked peaceful. Vast oceans stretched across its surface, green forests rose from the land, and mountains stood like giants. Yet everywhere, there was a silence that did not feel natural. No birds filled the sky. No herds moved across the plains. It was a world alive in body, but not in spirit. The research team landed near a ruined human settlement. The buildings were still standing, their metal and stone untouched by time. Streets stretched out in perfect lines, but no voices filled them. It was as if the inhabitants had simply vanished. The scholars walked through the ruins, their steps echoing. Dust rose around their boots, but the air was warm, too warm, as if the city still remembered life. One of them touched a cracked wall. It was hot. Not from the sun, not from fire, but from something beneath, something old. The team exchanged glances. None of them spoke. They had mocked the rule before, but now the silence pressed down on them. The buildings felt like watchers, the air like a breath waiting to be drawn. Then came the sound. A low vibration, so deep it could not be heard, only felt. The ground trembled softly beneath their feet. Instruments flickered, scanners failed, and one by one their systems went dark. The young scholar who had once laughed the loudest now felt his chest tighten. He whispered, "What if the rule was true?" The leader silenced him with a sharp glance. Pride again, pride that would not let them turn back. They had come too far, and curiosity burned too bright. They followed the vibrations deeper into the ruins, toward a chamber hidden beneath the city. What they found there would haunt them forever. The chamber was filled with machines, ancient yet still alive, humming with quiet power. At the center stood long rows of glass structures. Inside them lay figures, humans. Not bones, not corpses, but bodies intact, sleeping as if time itself had frozen around them. The scholars stared in disbelief. The humans were taller than the records described, their forms strong, their faces calm. Each chest rose and fell with slow, steady rhythm. Heartbeats, slow but powerful, echoed through the room like drums of war. One of the aliens stumbled back, whispering in fear. "They are not gone. They are waiting." Silence fell over the group. The whispers of the galaxy's rule returned to their minds. Never disturb the humans. Now they understood why the rule existed. These beings were not fragile, not broken. They were something else. Something beyond fear. But arrogance is a disease, and curiosity its poison. Among the scholars was one who could not resist. He stepped forward, his trembling hand reaching for the controls of a glass chamber. He wanted to see one awake, to prove that humans were nothing more than legends. The leader tried to stop him, but it was too late. The chamber hissed. Frost melted. A single eye opened, golden and sharp, staring directly at them. The alien froze, his body trembling as if the universe itself had turned against him. The human did not move, did not speak. It only watched, and in that gaze was a silence deeper than the void. A silence that promised the rule was not superstition. It was survival. And as the chamber fully opened, something stirred not only on that world, but across the stars. The rule had been broken. The humans were no longer sleeping. The galaxy would never be the same again. The research vessel drifted in orbit, its hull shaking as systems flickered under invisible interference from the planet below. The crew worked in silence, each of them feeling the weight of what they had discovered. No one dared speak of the human they had seen stir in the chamber. The golden eye, the slow heartbeat, the silent gaze, it lingered in every thought like a shadow that could not be shaken away. The landing team returned to the ship, but the silence followed them. The air in the control room was thick, heavy, as though sound itself was afraid to move. Each scholar pretended to study data, yet none of them truly looked at their screens. The readings made no sense. Energy pulsed through the ruins in patterns too complex to understand, signals that moved like blood through a living body. Perhaps it was a malfunction, one of the younger crew muttered, though his voice was weak and unconvincing. Perhaps the chamber was broken. The leader did not answer. His eyes stayed fixed on the blue planet below. Deep in his heart he knew it was no malfunction. Something slept there. Something vast, something terrible. Hours passed, but unease only grew. The ship scanners swept across the planet again and again, each pass revealing stranger details. Whole cities stood untouched, their towers unbroken, their streets clear of decay. But no life moved among them. It was as though the humans had left their world perfectly intact before stepping away. And yet, buried under each city, the scanners found the same strange energy signatures, like a heartbeat beneath stone. One of the scholars finally broke the silence. If they are truly sleeping, then why did they choose this? Why bury themselves under their own cities? No one answered. None of them wanted to guess. The research team prepared another descent. Pride, arrogance, and curiosity once again ruled their decisions. To retreat would mean shame, the loss of honor, the mockery of those who had laughed with them. To return without proof would mean becoming the very thing they had once ridiculed, fearful children trembling at ghost stories. They landed again, this time on the other side of the planet. From above, the city looked alive. Skyscrapers reached toward the sky, metal shining faintly through layers of dust. When the landing craft touched down, the team stepped out into the silence. Their boots pressed into soil that was strangely soft, almost like ash, but no wind carried it away. The ruins were perfect. Windows stood unbroken, doors unlocked, machines intact. One of the scholars brushed his hand across a wall. It was warm again, too warm. They could almost feel a pulse beneath the stone, as though the world itself was breathing around them. The silence grew heavier. The sound of their movements echoed in the air, bouncing strangely, like whispers answering them. One alien froze, tilting his head. "Do you hear that?" The others stopped. For a moment there was only silence. Then came the faintest sound. Not wind. Not machinery. It was soft, rhythmic, like footsteps, except none of them were moving. Fear flickered in their eyes, but the leader urged them forward. They descended into another underground chamber, this one larger than the first. Lights flickered automatically as they entered, as though the machines recognized their presence. Rows upon rows of glass chambers stretched into the shadows. And inside each chamber, the same figures lay sleeping. Humans. Some of them looked peaceful, their hands folded across their chests. Others looked as if they had been frozen mid-motion, fists clenched, jaws tight, faces locked in expressions of fury. Each chest rose and fell slowly, each heartbeat steady. The youngest scholar shivered and whispered, "It is not just one city. It is the whole world." The others finally understood. The ruins above were not abandoned cities. They were the outer shells of something greater. Every city was a nest, every tower a marker, every street a path to the chambers below. The planet was not silent by accident. It was a tomb of sleepers. One alien stumbled back, his voice shaking. "If they all awaken, the galaxy will burn." The leader's hands tightened behind his back. His mind raced. He remembered the old rule. Never disturb the humans. He finally understood why that rule had survived for so many centuries. It had not been superstition. It had been a warning, a desperate plea to keep the galaxy safe. But it was already too late. The first chamber they had opened had already stirred. The human's eye had opened, and in that single moment, something deep beneath the surface of the planet had awakened. The ground began to tremble. Dust fell from the ceiling of the chamber, and the lights flickered with unstable energy. The ship above reported strange readings, magnetic surges, power signatures rising like storms. Panic spread among the crew, but the leader forced them to retreat. They ran back through the silent streets, their footsteps echoing like thunder. The landing craft rose into the air, carrying them back toward their ship. But none of them noticed the faint glow rising in the city behind them. None of them noticed the chambers slowly humming louder, one by one, as if in answer to a call. The silence of Earth was ending. Something was stirring, and the galaxy's most ancient fear was about to be remembered. The ship floated above the blue planet, silent except for the nervous voices of the crew. None of them spoke of it directly, but the same memory lived in every mind, the golden human eye opening in the dark chamber, the slow breath that did not belong in a tomb. Even when their leader ordered silence, even when he told them to focus on data, the image would not fade. It followed them in their dreams, in the flickering lights of the ship, in the quiet hum of the engines. They pored over the recordings from the ruins, searching for answers, but the answers only deepened their unease. The data showed that humans had once filled the world with life. Cities spread across the surface, technology far ahead of what anyone had expected for a species so young. And then, all at once, the recordings ended. Machines still worked. Power still flowed. But the people were gone, sealed away in chambers of glass and steel. Among the fragments of recovered logs, a voice spoke in a tongue none of the scholars had heard before, yet their translators cracked it slowly. The voice was calm, almost gentle. It spoke of storms, of wars, of enemies rising from the stars. It spoke of betrayal. And then it ended with a phrase that froze the blood of every scholar aboard the ship. "We will sleep until the stars call us again." The words carried weight. They were not a declaration of defeat, nor a surrender. They were a promise. The leader gathered the crew in the central chamber. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed unease. "We came to uncover truth, and we have found it. Humans did not vanish. They chose this. But we must know why. We must know what they prepared for." The youngest among them spoke quickly, fear sharp in his tone. "We should leave. We have seen enough." The rule was not a myth. It was protection. If they wake. "They are already stirring," the leader cut him off. His words dropped like stones into the silence. "And if the galaxy is to face this, we must be ready. Knowledge is our only defense." So they descended once more. This time, their craft touched down near the ruins of what had once been a massive human capital. Towers rose like black teeth into the clouds, cracked but unbroken, their tips glowing faintly as though light still lived inside. Streets stretched in endless lines, empty yet spotless, as if they had been cleaned only yesterday. The silence was deeper here, suffocating, broken only by the hiss of their own breathing. They entered a hall of stone and metal. The walls were carved with words their translators struggled to decipher. Slowly, meanings began to appear: honor, memory, survival, war. Images followed, humans standing against fleets, humans standing against monsters, humans standing against death itself. Each carving showed them not as fragile prey, but as predators who refused to fall. The scholars grew pale. For the first time, they began to understand why their ancestors had feared. In the center of the hall stood a great console, its surface covered in dust. When one of the crew brushed it clean, the machine came to life. Light flooded the hall. A recording played, and a human figure appeared in shimmering projection. Its voice was deep, steady, and clear. "If you are hearing this, then we are not yet ready to wake. But if you have disturbed our sleep, know this: our silence was not weakness. It was mercy. We gave the galaxy peace. Do not take it from us." The projection ended. The hall went dark again. No one spoke. The only sound was the slow drip of water from cracks in the ceiling. Then the ground shook. Not a small tremor, not the faint heartbeat they had felt before, but a rolling thunder that cracked the stone beneath their feet. Dust poured from the ceiling, and the console flickered to life again without being touched. Lines of unreadable data streamed across the display, faster than their translators could follow. The leader's voice was harsh, commanding. "Back to the ship. Now." They ran through the empty streets as the tremor grew into a quake. Towers groaned, but they did not fall. Lights that had been dead for centuries sparked to life one by one, glowing with golden fire. Far above, the orbiting ship reported massive power surges spreading across the entire planet, like a pulse racing through veins. From space, Earth no longer looked like a quiet blue world. Lights traced across its surface in patterns, bright and unnatural, forming vast networks of energy. The research team reached their landing craft, panting with fear. But before they could board, one of the younger scholars froze and pointed back at the city. In the distance, a chamber of glass stood open. The human inside was gone. The leader's voice dropped into a whisper. "It has already begun." The ship lifted off, carrying them away from the surface, but the silence of the world was broken now. From the cities below, faint sounds rose, metal groaning, air hissing, machines stirring back to life after centuries. It was not the noise of ruins. It was the noise of awakening. And somewhere in the endless rows of chambers, more golden eyes opened in the dark. The ship drifted in low orbit, silent except for the frantic chatter of scanners trying to keep up with what was happening below. Data poured across the screens in wild bursts, power signatures that dwarfed anything the scholars had ever recorded, seismic waves spreading across continents, magnetic storms twisting through the atmosphere. Earth was no longer quiet. The planet that had seemed so still, so lifeless, was waking. The crew watched in uneasy silence. They had come for answers, but now every answer only made more questions. How long had the humans been asleep? Why had they chosen this slumber? And what would happen when they were all awake? Inside the research ship, the atmosphere was heavy. No one laughed now, no one mocked the old rule. The arrogance that had once filled them was gone, replaced with the realization that they had done something irreversible. They had disturbed what was meant to remain untouched. The leader stood at the center of the control room, his eyes locked on the screens. His voice was low, but steady. Prepare for another descent. We must confirm what has changed. The youngest scholar almost shouted. Another descent. Have you gone mad? The planet itself is stirring. We should leave, we should send warning to the council. And what will you tell them? The leader snapped. That you broke the one rule every empire obeyed? That you woke the humans with your arrogance? No. We must know more. We must see with our own eyes what is happening. Only then can we decide. Silence followed. No one dared argue again. Pride and fear held them in place. The landing craft descended once more, cutting through storm-heavy clouds. Lightning danced in the sky, glowing with strange colors, as if the very air was charged with alien energy. When the craft broke through, the sight below made every heart stop. The cities glowed. Towers that had been dark now pulsed with light. Streets burned with golden lines, as though veins of fire spread across the surface. Whole regions shone like constellations, each city awakening in perfect unison. The craft touched down on the edge of a ruined metropolis. At least, it had looked ruined before. Now the ground thrummed beneath their feet, and lights crawled up the sides of buildings, igniting them one by one until the skyline glowed like a crown. The silence was gone. Instead, the air carried a low, endless hum, like the breathing of something vast. The scholars moved through the streets, every step heavy with dread. Their instruments picked up signals, but the data made no sense. Power surges beyond measure, systems activating in patterns they could not predict. They reached another underground chamber. The entrance stood wide open, as if waiting for them. Inside, the rows of glass chambers stretched farther than they could see, glowing softly in the dark. Dozens of them were open. And the figures that had once lain inside were gone. The youngest scholar's voice cracked. Where are they? The leader whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. They are awake. A sudden noise echoed through the chamber. Not machines, not systems, but footsteps. Slow, deliberate, heavy. The crew froze, their bodies rigid with fear. From the shadows at the far end of the chamber, a figure stepped forward. It was human. The scholars had seen images in ancient records, but those images had not prepared them for this. The human stood tall, its frame powerful, its eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. It looked at them, not with confusion, not with fear, but with a gaze so sharp it felt like a blade pressed against their throats. The leader tried to speak, but no sound came out. His voice failed him. The human tilted its head slightly, studying them. Then it spoke, and its voice was calm, steady, but it carried the weight of command. You should not be here. The words echoed in the chamber, and for a moment none of the scholars could move. The youngest finally stumbled back, his voice breaking into panic. We meant no harm. We only wanted to know the truth. The human's gaze sharpened. The truth. It took a step closer, the sound of its boots like thunder. The truth is simple. We slept so the galaxy could breathe. And now you have broken that peace. The chamber shook again, dust falling from the ceiling. More lights flared to life, more chambers unlocking one by one. The hum grew louder, deeper, as if the planet itself was answering the human's words. The leader finally found his voice. Wait, please, we must understand. Why did you choose this? Why did you hide? The human looked at him for a long moment, then spoke softly, almost with sorrow. We did not hide. We waited. Because when we rise, the stars tremble. Before the scholars could reply, alarms blared in their earpieces. The orbiting ship reported massive energy surges across every continent. Chambers were opening everywhere. Heartbeats once slow now thundered in unison. The leader's face turned pale. He gave the order to retreat, his voice breaking for the first time. They fled through the glowing streets, their footsteps chasing them like echoes of doom. Above them, the sky lit with strange fire, and the hum grew into a roar that seemed to shake the heavens themselves. The ship carried them back into orbit, but the view below no longer showed a quiet world. Earth burned with light, alive again after centuries of silence. And as they stared, unable to look away, they realized the truth. The galaxy's most feared predators were no longer sleeping. The research ship trembled as it circled the glowing planet below. Earth was no longer a world of silence. From orbit, the surface looked alive, veins of golden fire stretching across continents, cities blazing like constellations come to life. The scholars stood at the observation deck in silence, watching, none of them able to speak. They had broken something ancient, and now they could not undo it. Inside the control room, alarms screamed. Power signatures were climbing far beyond safe levels. Whole continents were shifting with seismic waves, not from natural forces but from machines buried deep beneath the crust. The youngest scholar whispered, almost to himself, "They are not just waking, they are preparing." The leader's face was pale, but his voice remained steady. "We must document everything. We cannot return with fear alone, we need proof." The crew obeyed, though their hands trembled as they worked. Every reading, every signal, every flicker of light from the surface was carefully recorded. But proof came with a cost. In the central chamber of the ship, the scholars gathered again. Some argued to leave, to abandon their mission and warn the council. Others argued to stay, insisting that this was the greatest discovery in galactic history. Voices rose, anger sparking in the air. Fear twisted into pride, pride twisted into recklessness. And then the mistake was made. One of the younger scholars, hot with arrogance, slammed his hand on the console. "We are scientists, not cowards. We must interact with them. We must show them we are not afraid." Before the leader could stop him, the scholar sent a signal to the surface, a simple pulse of energy, aimed at one of the awakening cities. A greeting, he claimed, a request for communication. The ship went silent. Everyone turned to him in horror. The leader's voice dropped to a whisper, cold and heavy. "What have you done?" The scholar tried to defend himself. "We must know if they can be reasoned with. If we show fear, they will treat us as prey. But if we reach out, perhaps." His words died as the sensors flared with impossible readings. The city below pulsed with blinding light, and the signal they had sent was not only received, it was answered. The ship shook violently. Systems crashed. Lights flickered. Every console screamed with warnings. A beam of golden energy shot into the sky from the city, locking onto their vessel like a predator fixing its gaze on prey. The crew panicked, voices overlapping in terror. Shields strained, engines whined, but the energy was not a weapon, it was something far worse. It was a voice. The sound filled the ship, not through speakers, but through the air itself, as though the walls were alive. A deep, steady voice spoke in a language none of them knew, yet every mind understood it. "Who disturbs our rest?" The crew froze, their hearts hammering. The youngest scholar, the one who had sent the signal, fell to his knees, his face pale, his arrogance shattered. The voice spoke again, sharper now. "We gave mercy. We gave silence. You chose to break it." The lights of the ship dimmed as though drained. The consoles went dark, one by one. The hum of the engines faltered. It was as if the human presence itself was reaching through their machines, stripping them bare. The leader forced himself to his feet, his voice shaking. We only sought knowledge. We meant no harm." There was no answer. Only silence. Then, from the surface, movement. Figures began to rise from the glowing city, dark against the golden light. Tall, broad-shouldered, their steps deliberate and unhurried. The scanners failed to read them. No temperature, no energy signatures, no biological data. Only shapes, moving with purpose. The crew watched in frozen terror as dozens of them looked upward, straight at the ship. One by one, their eyes opened, golden, burning like small suns. The leader gave the order to retreat. Engines roared back to life, the ship tearing itself free from orbit with desperate speed. But the silence on the deck was heavier than before, filled with the weight of what they had done. The humans had not attacked. They had not fired weapons, had not chased them into the sky. They had simply opened their eyes. And somehow, that was worse. The youngest scholar could not stop shaking. His voice cracked, broken with guilt. I only wanted to prove we were not afraid. No one looked at him. No one spoke. They all knew the truth. His arrogance had been the spark, but the fire was older, deeper, unstoppable. The humans had been waiting, and now their wait was over. The ship fled into the dark, but every star beyond seemed colder now. The galaxy had survived on a single rule, carried through ages. Never disturb the humans. That rule was broken. And the stars themselves would tremble. The ship drifted through deep space, engines burning hot, but no one on board felt safe. The crew sat in silence, their eyes haunted, their voices swallowed by fear. Every shadow on the deck seemed heavier, every hum of machinery too loud. The young scholar who had sent the signal could not lift his head. His arrogance was gone, replaced by hollow shame. He knew what none of them could say aloud. The humans had heard them, and the humans had answered. Days passed, but the feeling of being watched did not fade. The crew began to whisper of strange dreams, dreams that felt too real to dismiss. They dreamed of battlefields stretching across stars, of worlds burning, of warriors with human faces standing against armies that no one else could defeat. Every crew member dreamed the same dream. When they woke, sweat covered their skin, their hearts pounding, but no one dared speak of it until the leader forced them. "They are inside us," he said grimly, breaking the silence in the command chamber. "Not with claws or weapons, but with memory. They are showing us what they are. What they were." The youngest scholar shook his head, trembling. "But how? How can they touch our minds from so far away?" The leader's eyes narrowed. "Because they were never fragile. We were told they were. We were told the rule was protection for them. But now I see it clearly, the rule was for us." At those words, the crew fell into silence. The truth was too sharp, too heavy to ignore. The galaxy had feared the humans not because of their weakness, but because of their strength. Suddenly, alarms blared. The ship's long-range sensors picked up movement, hundreds of signals scattered across the void. Not alien fleets, not natural phenomena. They were structures. Ancient, hidden stations rising from the dark, systems long thought dead flickering back to life. Each station pulsed with the same golden energy as the human city. The navigator's voice shook as she read the data. They had colonies. Outposts. We thought they were ruins, but they are waking up too. One by one, the golden beacons ignited, each a flare of human presence reawakening across the galaxy. Entire sectors that had been silent for millennia now burned with new light. The crew watched in horrified awe as constellations were rewritten, reshaped by the rise of old human power. The leader's voice dropped to a whisper, barely heard over the alarms. "We did not wake one world. We woke them all." And then came the message. Not through sound, not through waves, but through every mind on the ship, the same voice that had shaken them before. "You chose to disturb the silence. Then you will carry our warning." The crew clutched their heads, groaning under the weight of the voice in their minds. Images flooded their vision, wars older than any empire, weapons that split stars, fleets so vast they blotted out suns. Humanity had once ruled not through numbers, but through sheer will. They had faced predators, machines, and horrors beyond imagination. And they had won. The youngest scholar broke, tears running down his face. "We were fools. We thought them prey." The voice thundered again, sharp and final. "Go. Tell them. The humans are awake." And just as suddenly as it had begun, the visions ended. The ship's lights returned, the alarms silenced. Yet the silence was worse than the noise. Every crew member sat pale and broken, their bodies trembling, their minds scarred by the weight of what they had seen. The leader rose, slow and unsteady. He looked at his people, and he knew none of them would ever be the same. "We cannot keep this secret," he said. "The Council must know. The galaxy must know. But when they hear, they will not rejoice. They will not prepare for peace. They will prepare for war." The crew nodded weakly, for they understood. They had not only broken the forbidden rule. They had awakened a storm older than memory itself. And now, the stars would never know silence again. The council chamber was vast, filled with voices that once carried authority but now trembled with unease. Word of the scholar's return had spread faster than the ship itself. Whispers raced through the stars, the humans were stirring. The forbidden rule had been broken. The scholars stood in the center of the chamber, their ship scarred, their faces pale, their eyes hollow from sleepless nights. Around them, representatives from countless alien civilizations leaned forward, demanding answers. The chamber echoed with anger, fear, and denial. The leader spoke first. His voice was steady, but the weight behind it silenced the noise. The humans are awake. Laughter erupted from one side, bitter and sharp. A massive warlord pounded his clawed hand against the table. Impossible. They are extinct. You bring us ghost stories, not facts. The youngest scholar flinched at the sound, but the leader did not move. You may laugh, but you will not laugh long. We saw their cities. We heard their voices. They are not extinct. They are not forgotten. They are waiting. Another counselor leaned forward, her eyes narrow. If what you say is true, then it was your ship that woke them. You have doomed us all. The chamber roared with agreement, voices rising in accusation. The scholars were blamed, cursed, threatened with exile. The youngest one bowed his head, guilt burning through him. But the leader raised his hand and spoke again, louder this time, cutting through the chaos. You think exile will save you? You think killing us will undo what has been done? No. This is larger than us. Larger than this council. The humans have risen, and they have spoken. The chamber fell silent, if only from the chill in his words. Every eye was fixed on him. They gave us a message, the leader continued. A message not just for us, but for every star that thinks itself safe. Their silence was mercy. Their sleep was restraint. And now, that restraint is gone. The counselors shifted uneasily. Some whispered prayers to forgotten gods, others scribbled frantic notes to their aides. A few, those who understood history too well, sat frozen, their faces drained of color. Finally, an elder counselor, older than most civilizations present, rose to his feet. His voice cracked, but it carried across the chamber. I was there, when the rule was first spoken. I remember the wars, though we swore never to speak of them. The humans are not prey. They are predators beyond predators. If they have awakened, he paused, his eyes closing. Then we are already too late. The silence that followed was suffocating. The chamber no longer felt like a place of power, but a cage holding frightened animals. Then, as if to confirm the elder's words, the great windows of the council chamber shuddered. Outside, in the cold of space, golden lights flickered among the stars, beacons rising from hidden ruins, forgotten outposts reawakening. Entire constellations shimmered with the pulse of human power returning to life. Gasps echoed through the chamber. No one dared to speak. The youngest scholar finally lifted his head, his voice soft but unshakable. We thought they were fragile. We thought the rule was to protect them. We were wrong. The rule was the only shield we had. The counselors stared at him, their expressions shifting from disbelief to terror. And in that moment, every leader in the galaxy understood the same truth. The time of whispers was over. The humans were awake. And nothing would ever be the same. The galaxy held its breath. Every world, every fleet, every council chamber across the stars turned their eyes toward the beacons that now burned like golden suns. The humans had awakened, and their silence was gone. On the scholarship, the crew sat in stillness, watching as transmissions flooded their systems, millions of signals, each carrying the same pulse, the same voice. It was no longer confined to their dreams or their thoughts. It was everywhere, undeniable, inescapable. The leader stood at the console as the message resolved into words, a language older than memory yet clear to every mind that heard it. The voice was calm, steady, but behind it was the weight of empires long buried. You carried our warning. You broke our silence. Now hear us. Across the galaxy, billions listened. Soldiers froze in their barracks, merchants stopped mid-trade, children huddled close to their elders. Even the predators of distant worlds felt a shiver crawl through their spines. The voice continued. We gave mercy once. We gave silence, so the stars might live in peace. But you could not leave us be. You forgot why the rule was spoken. The beacons flared brighter. Entire star systems lit up like torches, ancient defenses long dormant awakening with a hum that shook the void itself. We are humanity. We are not fragile. We are not prey. We are the storm that ended wars older than your histories. We are the hand that broke the predators you now call legends. And we are awake. The council chambers across the galaxy erupted in chaos. Some shouted for war, others begged for retreat. Some demanded alliances, desperate to appease the sleeping giants. But the humans' message drowned out every voice. Choose wisely. You may stand with us, or you may stand against us. But know this, silence will not protect you anymore. The youngest scholar fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. His arrogance had unleashed this, yet he could not help but feel awe. The leader, though, remained cold and unyielding. He knew what this meant. The galaxy would splinter. Some would fight, some would surrender, some would hide. But no one could ignore what had awakened. On distant worlds, human forms stepped out from the shadows of their ruins, their golden eyes glowing like suns. They moved with purpose, slow and deliberate, not rushing, for they had waited too long already. The stars themselves trembled, as if remembering the weight of their old masters. And in that trembling silence, every being in the galaxy understood the truth. The humans had returned. And the age of fear had begun again.